Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael D'Antonio. I'm the author of Mortal Sins. And with me tonight are the heroes who've lived this story. I've tried to tell folks that there are a few books that are special. And I've written and co-authored and ghostwritten quite a few books, and none of them has meant what this book means to me. This is a book about a genuine civil rights movement. It's been under-recognized and underappreciated for what it has accomplished on behalf of abused children, on behalf of equality, on behalf of the people who are the church. And make no mistake that for Catholics, for all Christians, the church is the people. And if you're not a Catholic and you're not a Christian, you can appreciate the concept that we are all one. And the folks on this stage have done more to promote the unity of humanity than any people I've ever met. So I'd like to introduce to you, from my left, Barbara Blaine. Barbara is a founder and director of the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. She has been doing this work since the mid-1980s, when no one else was willing to talk about it, when no one else was there to support people who have been victimized and people who are fighting for their rights. Barbara was there. And she was the person who went on television first. She alerted the world to what became an international crisis, and she's devoted her life to this cause. Next to Barbara is Jeffrey Anderson. Jeff Anderson brought the second lawsuit ever brought against the Roman Catholic Church in America. When a couple whose son was abused by a priest, who was then allowed to escape because of the policy of the hierarchy, because of the pledge to avoid scandal that all bishops and cardinals take, Jeff was the man recommended for the job. And he was then, and he is now, the orneriest lawyer I've ever met. And certainly one of the most courageous and most tough-minded attorney that I've ever met, and that anyone who's ever encountered him has ever met. He is a force of nature. To my right is Tom Doyle. When no ordained man would stand up for abused children, Tom stood up. Tom was a high flyer. In the mid-1980s, he was a man to watch in the Catholic hierarchy. He could have had almost any job he wanted in the church. And if you don't think that's power, then you don't know the Catholic Church. This is the most highly developed network in the world. The power and prestige that were available to Tom as he worked in the Vatican Embassy in Washington were enormous. When he got the assignment to check out a case of abuse in Louisiana, he took it seriously. And he took the welfare of children seriously, and he valued the welfare of children above his own career. And if you don't think priests care about the career, then you don't know priests. This is not a vocation where they hand you things. The ambition in the ranks of the priesthood and among bishops is intense. And as spiritual as Tom may have been, he was an ambitious fellow too. And he believed in the church. He believed in what the hierarchy said. And he's still a Christian man, but he's practiced Christianity by fighting on behalf of children. And because of that, he's been abused in ways that no man should be abused. Just one little example, he loses the great job in the Vatican embassy because he's persona non grata, because he won't keep his mouth shut. He finds himself work as an Air Force chaplain, and he gets to that golden moment just short of the pension. And of course his bishop makes sure he loses his job. This is how they roll. And this is a man who refused to be intimidated and has become a hero in the movement. Next is Patrick Wall. Patrick, come on, let's give it to him. Patrick Wall is probably the youngest member of our panel. He was a young monk and became a priest who then pastored churches that had been struck by the scandal. So he came into parishes and cleaned up the mess after somebody was accused and then typically shuttled to another parish. And this is the outrage of the scandal that Mortal Sins addresses. This is not about the church per se. This is about the management of the church. This is cover-up. This is Watergate with a clerical collar on. And Patrick was a servant and did his best by the people in his parishes, but he could not abide what he saw. And he has since become a layperson who's married and has a family and has pursued the investigation of cases of abuse around the world. I'm singularly impressed by his work in Alaska among Native Alaskans, which was absolutely critical to them finding some bit of justice. And he now crisscrosses the world doing good work. And last but not least is our surprise guest, Richard Sipe. Richard, as first a priest and also a monk from St. John's, and then as a psychotherapist, social scientist, and educator, investigated this problem when no one would talk about it. This was before Oprah mentioned child abuse on TV. And this is something that I think is important for all of us to appreciate. As late as 1980, the medical texts that physicians read for their education told them that there was no such thing as child sexual abuse. Oh, sure, there were crazy instances, maybe 1 in a million. Literally, this is what was taught, 1 in a million. And Richard understood better, but he understood more that Catholic priests were suffering with the burden of the church's sexual teachings. And as a therapist, he was hearing over and over again of the problems that ordained men ran into. And many of them were criminal problems. And he very carefully assembled the first book ever published on this crisis. And in 1990, it was published to great acclaim among those who knew and to great outrage among those who would deny. Richard is the intellectual father of this movement. He will laugh with embarrassment and he'll push you aside with modesty that is genuine. But he is the person who got us thinking about this. So I think, Richard, it might be a good place to start, to ask you to try to go back to your earliest work and what you heard as you were doing therapy, as you were teaching, as you were listening to your colleagues about the problems of the men who came into your care.
I'll try that. My wife